thank you for joining us here at Lessons from School of Life today.
Thank you. I've spent over 20 years in the sort of professional industry and made a move into personal development. Once I sort of had this awakening that actually helping businesses save millions of pounds didn't really excite me anymore, and I was much more behind the notion of helping people. And not only that, but I came from a background where I was in quite a toxic marriage, and I went through a really very toxic divorce, which I now recognize meant I was living in this place of fear and uncertainty for many, many years, which ultimately had a long-term effect on my health with stress and everything else. But it took me probably the best part of 10 years from the marriage ending to getting to a point where I was starting to make some changes. And now much of that was me realizing that there is changes to make. I don't have to continually push against the flow of life. But I've been really passionate now about kind of finding ways to help other people get out of it. It shouldn't take 10 years, right? So it's all about how do we help people transform out of their place of fear, out of their place of uncertainty and limiting beliefs and whatever else is holding back in life. How can we make people, or guide people, should I say, into finding more peace in life?
And I was thinking about is like, why is it that we have all of our needs met and we just kind of enjoy the things that we have today instead of trying to fight each other and make each other point about this division that we're going through in terms of masculinity, femininity, the dating, the relationships. So how exactly do fears and insecurities influence the decision making in our personal and professional lives today, both for men and women, just for humans?
Yeah, and actually you picked up on a couple of very specific things there, talking about division. And at the moment, there does seem to be a society viewpoint coming through that, men hurt women, women hurt men. Ultimately, being hurt is a feeling, right? It's an emotion, and we can only allow ourselves to be hurt if, when we've had the external stimulus that's come in of words or actions or whatever, and the way we interpret them, we allow ourselves to give rise to those feelings. What I'm going down into there is sort of emotional mastery, which is quite an advanced thing to be able to develop. But unfortunately, the way society has been recently by creating division is division effectively creates people into a bit of a victim mindset. So, and we see it politically as well, we see it between the genders, we see it in all sorts of areas of life. And when you've got sort of strong opposing views generated by certain people or circumstances that really sort of draw people into the polar opposites, it creates division. It creates a fear of the other party, of the opposite side. Now, kind of, when it comes to the fear within the human psyche, there are kind of two main drivers that work against us, right? So the first one is that we are innately programmed to be on the lookout for dangers, right? The amygdala, the part of the brain called the amygdala, is programmed to keep us safe. Now, back in our cave-dwelling ancestors' days, that had a very key role to play, constantly on the lookout for wild animals or threats to life. Now, for most people in the modern world, physical dangers aren't such a prevalent problem, but the amygdala is still active, it's still programmed. So, of course, what it's looking for are the more psychological things, right? And very often it's pulling out our own fears in itself. Because the other thing is, media is very good, and I'm talking about the news here more than Facebook and everything else, although that has a role to play in, creating comparison, which in itself brings up the fear of not being good enough. But media in itself is a tool that creates uncertainty, right? So we're addicted to watching the media because we want to get some certainty about what's happening next, but all we get is more uncertainty or more division or more sort of polar views. And then when it comes to the psyche side, right? So growing up as all the way from kids and through pretty much school and any relationships we go through, we gather frames of reference, but we fill in the gap. So what I mean is, as a kid, you might be shopping with one of your parents and daddy, can I have a candy bar?
Right.
And the response is, daddy's busy, he's stressed, he's had a long day at work. No, you've not been good enough. Now, what the dad probably means in that scenario is you haven't been exceptional in order to deserve a treat. But what the kid hears is you haven't been good enough. So the kid's subconscious starts to build this limiting belief of I'm not good enough. And of course, the next event that comes along, our amygdala kicks in and is looking for things to validate our belief that we're not good enough, right? So with those two things working against us, it's natural for us to, for the sake of safety, to be constantly looking for things that are dangerous, that cause fear.
This amygdala is hyperactive and is still gauging. It's actually become more hyperactive in this individual as time has progressed, or within our society. That's what we're witnessing. So how does one really grasp and get a control of this aspect to kind of fight the storms in their life or in their head?
Most people who are, in victim mentality don't necessarily realize they are. Anyone who's got that thought of somebody made me feel bad, that's a victim mentality, because ultimately
you feel bad.
It's your own feelings, right? And you have to take ownership for your feelings, right? So yes, you'll get people who are deep in the victim mentality, which are much more obvious, and that's what people think about. But the majority of people, I would say, are still in that victim mindset, because and when you're doing that, you're basically giving control over your emotions and your fears and your feelings over to the outside world.
Right.
So the way to do that is to basically, the first step is to take ownership of your feelings. And for example, when you're triggered, when someone says something and it triggers you, it's triggering you because it's subconsciously reminding you of something that's happened in the past, right? And sometimes it doesn't even have to be someone saying anything. It can be the way someone looked or the way someone sounds or something that's triggered a memory that in the past has made you feel unsafe, be it psychologically or whatever. So that creates this sort of protection mechanism. The amygdala is kicking back in again, and you get triggered because you need to protect yourself. So it's understanding what it is in your past life, or what series of circumstances or various relationships you've had that might be giving rise to those reactions, rather than focus on the stimulus that's caused the reaction.
But unfortunately, it's not. And and so it just means we have work to do, and pay attention to all of these factors that you're highlighting.
One of the most challenging things, I think, for people to do is actually quieten their mind. As certainly over the last 20 to 30 years, we've become so used to being distracted, and we almost need to be distracted, because if we're not distracted, then the negative thoughts start to come back in. This is the prefrontal cortex. If other parts of your brain aren't active and concentrating on something or being distracted, the negative thoughts will then come in via the prefrontal cortex. But if you go back 50 years and you watch a TV program or a newsreel or something like that, you'll actually see that the camera shot will run for about 20-30 seconds before it changes scene. Whereas if you watch TV now, you'll probably see that it's about 3 or 4 seconds before the scene's changed, right? Because we are so used to this constant change and distraction, right? And that's why a lot of people find it difficult to actually sit with their family at a dinner table without getting their phones out, because they're addicted to this constant distraction, because it's what we've become conditioned to. And actually silencing the mind is one of the healthiest things we can do to start actually allowing ourselves to process our thoughts and our fears.
For me, and I'd rather not be on this thing at all. I really think it's counterproductive in many ways. But
have you ever read Power versus Force by David Hawkins?
What is it called?
It's called Power versus Force by
No,
David Hawkins. It's quite a heavy read, but he talks about, we were talking about victimhood with despair and everything at the bottom, with gratitude being another level up, and then you've got joy and all the way up to enlightenment. So that he's put that in a scale. I think there's 17 levels he's put into a scale. It's a fascinating book, and there becomes a point when we reach acceptance where we're giving more to the world. Was it neutrality? I should know. Where we're giving more to the world than we're taking back, right? So people in victim mode and people so far up survival mode element are actually taking more out of the world in terms of energy and everything else. And it's getting to that point of gratitude where you actually start giving back, but it's like a logarithmic scale. So you get, so
It's like a framework with 17 stages that it develops. It helps you visualize and pretty much highlight what stage you're in and what effects and energy and exhaustion levels you're just burning through resources at different levels.
He refers to it as the map of consciousness, right? And at each of the levels, he will describe a kind of, and it can be individuals, it could be societies, it could be whole countries, even the globe, the world has got an average map of consciousness, which is slowly rising. It describes how at each level, the kind of people that are in there, why they're in there, and the way they act and their views and that sort of thing. So it becomes quite easy to understand and read people. And one of the things that's really good about it is that you can learn to understand people from their limitations. So again, coming back to this whole fear of what other people think, when someone's acting out or they're acting in a certain way, sort of whether they're narcissistic or whatever, you begin to really appreciate that they're acting the way they are because of their insecurities, because of their limitations. And it enables you to have compassion, because for them to have that limiting belief and that insecurity, what's going on in their head? Right, they're obviously struggling with something, so you can have compassion for them for that struggle rather than judge them for the behavior that comes out because of that struggle. And when you get to that point, that is kind of like almost like getting over the peak of the hill. You know, things, although we're still growing, it seems easier to move forwards.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Recently I see too many videos about YouTube narcissists on YouTube, and there's this constant bashing at them. It's almost like revenge and hate and foulness. And just the same exact thought you're saying came into my head. Well, if these people are really exerting all this toxicity and negativity, it really hurt, right? And we should help these people, right? We're talking about how confidence needs to have the other spectrum, which is compassion. Because masculinity is only focused on this one thing, which is confidence, which could be faked really easily, which is what narcissists do. They're really insecure, but they fake. They're really good at faking. They're great actors. And 90% of the world is acting. We've established that. So confidence is probably a false basis to gauge somebody's ability, or that's not the entirety of our existence, where you just want to be in this energy of confidence, because you got to have compassion and confidence. You got to be confident enough to believe in yourself, not to hurt other people, and compassionate enough to help other people and also not hurt yourself. You know what I'm saying?
What I would say to that is, what is confidence? Because confidence, really, what we perceive as confidence is the people who are very, very bolshy, determined to put their opinion forward, right? Now, usually they're wanting to put their opinion forward because they're either closed-minded and don't want to accept other people's opinions, or they have some sort of insecurity about the fact that if their opinion is disagreed with, they're unhappy about it. So they're very forceful with their opinion. But that's not confidence. That's the act, right? What confidence really is a lack of shyness. It's the absence of shyness, right? Now, shyness is obviously limiting beliefs. You don't want to step forward because you're worried about how people are going to judge you, because ultimately you feel you're not good enough. So when you can step into your authenticity, when you can love yourself for who you are, your shadows and shining your light and all the elements of you together, when you can have enough trust and respect for your own opinions, right, then there is really no such thing as confidence. Somebody who's confident or trying to be confident will actually end up being more arrogant. Whereas confidence in itself is just purely being letting go of all the fears of judgment and everything else that goes with it.
Having no fears.
To be authentic. And linking that with compassion as well, until you can be compassionate about other people's limitations. Again, changing that viewpoint from, are they being critical to me, or are they just acting out from their own place of their level of happiness and their insecurities and their mental state in any one moment? That allows you to be authentic, and if someone fires something at you, you're just like, hey, I'm cool with that. You're entitled to your opinion. I understand that's what you see in me, and having the notion that actually everybody's going to have a different view of who you are, and what someone else's belief is about me inside their head is none of my business. I can possibly influence it a little bit, but ultimately I can't control it.
It's usually their projection, right? It's
Yeah.
this projection that they've created, this role that they've assigned you to play in their world.
When they first meet me, there's going to be things about me that subconsciously remind them about other people or other situations or whatever it is. So they will already have a bias as to who I am before I've opened my mouth. You know what I mean?
That happens to me a lot at dates. I was like, that's exactly how I feel. They already have an opinion about me before I open my mouth. That's funny.
I know there are going to be people out there listening to this who are going to be saying to themselves that they're maybe in a worse place than most people, and they might think there's no way I can achieve that. It all seems too overwhelming, too difficult. And honestly, it's not. There are some very small, it's an incremental journey, right? No one's saying just make this choice, turn around and you'll be happy. It's as long as you can feel 1% better tomorrow than you did today, then in 100 days time you're going to be a completely different person, right? So it's be gentle on yourself. It's any form of growth like this is a slow process, and you have to keep sight on where you've been and how far you've come, and not focus with too much judgment on how far you've yet to go, because ultimately we never stop growing, right? It's an ongoing process. So I personally have been in some incredibly low places. I've had very serious depression in my past. If I can pull myself out of these sorts of moods and move forwards, then I promise anyone can. So.
Well, that's inspiring, and I think a lot of people are in that place, unfortunately. But the good thing is that there's a way out, and it's not as hard as it seems. And I know another topic was authenticity, but so the reason why we're not authentic, and we touched on a lot of this thing, is because we abandon our true self when we're really young, when we got rejected, right? And when we got rejected, we discarded ourselves. That's what a narcissist did too, really bad. And so they discarded themselves, and I remember putting on new clothes, trying to become like a gangster of a kid because everybody else was doing it and I wanted to fit in. And I stopped reading books and stopped doing all of the things that I really enjoyed. And so it all just to create this facade and this environment, this image, this mask, which I was completely miserable behind. And I think you're one of the few, Sebastian, who really understands this. I've talked to, how many people I've talked to this year alone? Probably at least 50 people doing what you're doing. More than that, maybe. They don't understand it at this level. And I can't really have a discussion with them about a lot of these things because they either get rattled and because they have their own ideas or insecurities that they're going with, right? Or they just haven't dealt with somebody who knows what they're talking about.
I think there's an element of, it's similar to, it's more of a thing that the girls do, is going out to look at horoscopes and tarot card readings and stuff like that, is because they're recognizing they've got a pain, they're recognizing they've got these fears and something in life isn't right, but they're not looking to do the work, because pressing into their dark thoughts is no pain, no gain, right? To find growth, we have to deal with the things that are creating the limiting beliefs, right? So we have to face the fears of our own fears, face the fears from our own shadows. And I think a lot of people are scared to do that. So they're almost looking for a magic wand. They're looking for someone else to give them the answer. And whereas a lot of girls are looking for that in these dark things going on the internet, I think for men, I think there's a certain sector of men that are thinking, well, I can't get girls, so this guy's going to fix all my problems, rather than I can't get girls because I'm too shy or need to work on this or whatever else. So there's an awful lot of that, which again, and what he's doing is, as you're absolutely right, is he's manipulating them, and he's preying on them, and he's using these vulnerable people who are struggling and suffering one way or another. And instead of helping them find their own route, he's promising them an answer that he can't give, because the answers have to come from within. So
I think you have a lot to contribute to the work that needs to be done, and you're right about this. It's just training old drugs with new tricks is become a tough gig.
Well, getting into the science of it, right? The more the more we repeat the same thought pattern, the stronger that neural connection becomes, right? So if we've got negative fear-based wiring, if you like, in our heads, the more we can start to think positively, the more you're strengthening the positive neural network, right? And the less, and on the flip side of that, the less you're using the negative ones, the weaker they become until they can eventually start to break down. So our minds can constantly rewire and change. It's not this belief that once we've hit the age of about 14, our brain stops developing is not true. The neural networks in the brain are constantly adapting and changing.
Yeah, it's AI. It's the biggest AI that we know.
Absolutely.
So what do you think? What do you think are the common fears and insecurities or lack mindset, you might say, that puts people in this situation where they're constantly reacting to the world instead of thinking about it in a positive way and adapting to the situation? So what do you think are the common ways in which fears and insecurities really hold us back? That's what I'm asking.
So the primary fear that we all have is that we are not good enough. So whether that's you're not good enough to do your job, which shows up as imposter syndrome, or whether you don't feel good enough to be in the relationship, so you're putting on with the dating game, right? One of the biggest things people have is they're like, who do I need to be for someone to find me attractive? So they go out there and they put on this persona, if you like. Now, the big problem with that is, right, that if they like that persona, well, that's okay until they start to see the real you showing through. And then all of a sudden they've got to decide whether they like that person or not.
Till you can't audition anymore, till the mask comes off.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the key thing here is the more authentic we can be, the more we can accept our shadows for who we are as much as our strengths, and sort of not care about the opinions of other people to that degree. The more we can go out there and be authentic, and the more we actually attract people that we're naturally, generally resonating with, rather than trying to force ourselves into this wider image, if you like, that we perceive that society wants us to be.
But we're fed this narrative where vulnerability is a weakness, not a strength. It's not a courageous thing for you to do, to be authentic in today's world. And not just today, but historically, I think over the last few hundred years, I think it's been pushed where you shouldn't be authentic, and it's really rewired itself in their programming, where people really think that, hey, if they're honest, if they're vulnerable, if they say what's on their mind, they're going to be taken either as naive and taken advantage of, or second, they're really going to be putting themselves in a situation that they have zero control over, which is frightening. And the third thing is that nobody else is doing it around them, like mainstream media that you talk about, their friends and family. So then it becomes a really lonely world, right? And as being authentic. So I think those are the three things, really. Would you agree that they're preventing us from moving forward? And I'm not trying to rebuttal with the negativity. What I'm highlighting is the facts. And I think we should have the facts on the table in order for us to come up with solutions to those things, which again, we're afraid to do collectively.
I don't think being authentic should be a lonely place. I think we fear being authentic because we fear that will drive us into a lonely place because people won't accept us for who we are. But having said that, people who would generally resonate with someone being authentic isn't going to be able to resonate with them. They're not going to be able to connect with them if they're not authentic, right? So in many ways, actually being inauthentic can be a much lonelier place because you might be surrounded by more people because you're trying to fit in with them.
But inside, you're completely alone and you can feel it.
So we say, you love your family, choose your friends, right? And I think a lot of people go around with an awful lot of loyalty to the friends they've got. And you know, they sound harsh, but at the end of the day, once you step into authenticity, if certain people end up dropping away because they no longer resonate with you because they used to like the facade you're putting on, or they suddenly decide they don't like the person you're resonating as, or showing up as, well, that's fine, because actually all you're doing is making space in your life for other people to come in who do resonate with you better.
Wow.
And then you're going to find more kindred souls, more kindred spirits, and you'll get more confidence being authentic, and you'll feel more valued for who you are. And the more you're authentic and the more people value you for the real you, the more natural confidence you're going to get, right? Because you're getting those frames of reference that actually you are a likable person. We have to let go of this idea that we need to please everybody. We have to accept that there are people that aren't going to, not necessarily dislike us, but they're just not going to get us. And that's fine, right? The minority of people are going to get us, but we want to allow that minority to find us so that we can mix with them, rather than try and play the field and play, as I say, I always say what we perceive society wants us to be, because everyone else is playing that same game. If you're trying to mix with people, trying to impress them by being what they want, what do you think they're doing? Right, they're playing the game, trying to be what they think you want them to be.
Nobody's real. Yeah. Wow. I think getting out of your self-perception and actually bringing yourself into the reality of what's going on is really it's that transformation that authenticity demands and requires, right? And in order for us to do that, we got to grow in our horizon and our perspective. Well, how do you see further? You just get higher, then you're able to see further. And so that's true. I've had to shed my skin multiple times. I think coincidentally right after high school, then furthermore even after college, then furthermore after my first long-term relationship or second long-term relationship, some of these major standpoints, and reevaluate some of those things. So in order for me to grow, and you're right, 9 out of 10 times a lot of the people didn't really care about me. It was about the facade that I was putting on or what I could provide for them. It was more about all of the things that I didn't think about rather than the things that I wanted it to be. So it's a harsh reality, and but it's a liberating fact. Whenever you get through from point A to point B of this transformation, you feel free, and you don't feel the pressure, right? The societal pressure. You're able to be of service, to be yourself, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be vulnerable. You have nothing to worry about, nobody to cater to, nothing to hold you back, and definitely more aligned with the energy and the purpose that you're meant to serve. So I get exactly what you're saying. I walked through those stages in my life, and I wear those stripes on my shoulders. It's a feat to do that. Believe me, it's better than finishing college.
Ultimately, we have to remember that other people are so busy worrying about what we think of them that they're not actually thinking much about us at all. And if we can let go of worrying about what other people are thinking about us, the good opinion of other people, we call it getting stuck in goop, good opinion of other people. The moment we can let go of that and realize actually the team of people or the society I'm trying to fit in with are just as desperately trying to fit in with me and everyone else. So why bother? Step back and be myself, because no one else is really judging. And then the other thing is that 99% of the time when people do say something to you that you feel is critical, it's generally because one way or another you've been a mirror to them. So something about you has raised something in them that they don't like about themselves. Right? So we can, as we start to get more advanced in mastering our own emotions and our own reactions, we can get to the point where we can actually read other people by the things they say to us, rather than take the things that they say to us personally.
So there comes a time when people will feel like that. You think, and how long does that journey take? Usually, if somebody was to say, Sebastian, I'm going to take you up on this. This is something I want to do. What would that look like?
I think with the right process, you'll start certainly within 6 months, and you can start feeling a difference. You can start recognizing yourself, catching yourself within a couple of months.
So consistency for 6 months.
It's building a positive habit, right? That catching yourself and redirecting your thought process is a positive habit, right? And habits do take time to build. But what we also have to remember here is we're not only building new habits, we have to disempower the old ones. Because if we don't do that, these old habits have been with us for decades, they will eventually start to push back. So we need to reframe them, disempower them, and then build new ones. And also things like stepping into a place of gratitude more, because what that does is it trains our brains, it trains our mindset to look for the positives. So that's one way of starting to counterbalance this natural amygdala searching for the fears side of things we've got, because we're actually starting to train other parts of our brain to actually look for the positives. And if you look for positives, you'll see positives. If you look for the negatives, you'll see negatives, and then you push yourself further and further into that state of fear.
Into that hole. Agreed. I think gratitude comes at like the higher spectrum of existence for humanity, versus fears and insecurity comes at the primal, which is the root chakra in spiritual sense. There's a root chakra, and gratitude is the highest chakra, where it's the crown chakra. And so most people are busy trying to meet their needs and feed their fears, and you try to hide their insecurities here.
Which is basically living in a state of survival.
Survival.
Mentally and physically exhausting.
Super exhausting. And so they never get to climb the ecstasy of life as to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you need to climb 6 more steps from here. Levels, right, to get to that place of gratitude, where you're just like, man, I'm grateful for everything that I got. It doesn't matter what I have, but I'm just happy that I have it, right? And it's not about comparison. It's not about nothing, right? It's just like enjoying the moment. We're having this moment. Who would have thought that some guy in London and some guy here in California, who's completely from a different world and space and time, and are having a conversation about this? I would have never imagined it. So I'm really grateful for these kinds of moments and opportunities, and just taking pleasure in that, regardless of what's going on outside of it. So I think it takes a long time for you to get from here to there, right? And most people think that, oh, well, once I have my needs met, once I feel like I'm not afraid, once I feel like I could get over my insecurities, let me work on my insecurities, let me go to the gym, let me work on my fears. So I don't think most people admit that they have fears. And now it's become okay to be insecure for some reason. And insecurity has been labeled toxic, and there's a completely different, but insecurity, and people who are calling other people toxic are the most insecure people. It's a confusing field out there right now. And but you never get to that place of gratitude. Attitude of gratitude could make anything happen. Miracles happen. So how does one let go and get to that point?
So what you basically described there is this whole notion of I'll be happy when my needs are met. I'll be happy, and the biggest problem with that is, right, I'll be happy when I earn this money. I'll be happy when I've got a girlfriend. I'll be happy when whatever, right? But then you reach that goal, and then so now I'm here. I'll be happy when, right? So if we're always putting conditions down onto our happiness, we will never be happy, because we're always putting happiness into the hands of other people doing stuff, or just stuff generally happening, right? So the first step is we have to choose to be happy regardless. Be happy in the now, right? Step into one of the things with society is we become very materialistic, right? So what we own signifies success and happiness and everything else. And as you look at some of the shanty towns in continental Africa, for example, right, where they've got nothing. They live in tin shacks, often sort of multiple families in a tiny
happiest, healthiest people we know.
Absolutely, right? Because it's almost like the more wealth we have, the more consumeristic we become, the more we compare ourselves to what other people have, and therefore think we should have before we can be happy, right? Which is all nonsense. That's living, no matter how much money you've got, how much wealth and abundance you've got, that's actually living in a scarcity mindset, because you're always thinking, I haven't got enough, right? Whereas actually, most of us in the Western world, we've got family, we've got roofs over our head, we live in your climate, my climate, relatively, geographically relatively stable, politically relatively stable. It's not like we're living in some of these war-torn areas. So even for the sense of that, we should be grateful.
Right.
And it's getting so happiness is really stepping into that space of abundance, Right? Now, abundance doesn't mean financial wealth necessarily. Abundance is, as you were saying, appreciating what you've got. I've got my health, I've got clothes, I've got family, I've got people I could turn to, everything like that. And one of the things that I get people to do when I'm working with them is to do a gratitude journal. And specifically, gratitude journals, you might have 20 lines that are the same every day. It's not the sort of journal you go back and read. It's you write it out, because the notion of writing it out makes you feel it more. And the idea is to actually feel gratitude in your heart, right?
While you're writing, you should
While
feel the emotions.
Feel the gratitude and the emotion. So what I always say to people is, as well as writing out, I've got healthy children, I've got a roof over my head, is choose at least 3 things from that day, small things from that day that you're grateful for. I made that old lady smile when I helped to get something off a high shelf, or whatever it might be, because those are the small things that we really don't appreciate, and those are the small things that, again, when people do things for us, there have been plenty of times when I've held doors open for people or helped people with various little things.
Absolutely.
And I've hardly got a response from them. And I'm like, I don't take that personally, but I'm just kind of thinking, well, you're living in a world where you don't appreciate the niceties, the small things.
You're distracted.
Yeah. So, and another thing that's really fascinating, I really love the science behind all of this as well. Some people just think this whole stuff is mindset woo-woo stuff, right? So I really love the science behind it. Now, every thought we have, every emotion we have, has a biochemical reaction in our bodies, right? So various different chemicals are released depending on our feelings and our thoughts and everything else. The interesting thing is that the biochemical makeup for fear and excitement is exactly the same. The only difference is the mindset. So you can actually get to the point where you fear something and you can train yourself to be excited about the outcome instead of fearing the outcome. It's a very easy switch.
So it's like the adrenaline rush that people talk about. So you're saying the positive side is the excitement, the negative side is the fear, and depending on how we perceive the particular situation to be, the chemical that it's going to induce in our brains and throughout our body is going to be very similar, and the mind's not going to be able to distinguish the difference between what.
Well, we have a choice. See, the default is, because of our programming and because most people are living in a state of fear, when things happen that are outside their comfort zone, they instantly get into that mindset of fear, right? But if you think about people that do dangerous sports, right, they're all constantly getting out of their comfort zone, right? And they may have a little bit of fear in there, but they've also got a huge dose of excitement, because that's why they do it. And it's exactly the same. We can play the same game with our mindset. As soon as something's happening, or as soon as we've got to do something that steps out of our comfort zone, whether that's stepping up to do a big meeting at work, or go to run a big seminar, or whatever it is, or
we can get excited for it. That you're saying.
Even having that challenging conversation with that relative is always difficult, right? You can approach it with a level of excitement of, once this is done, I'll have said my piece and it's all out the way. Rather than go into the conversation with a piece of, oh, this is going to be really terrible and it's going to be a nightmare. Because ultimately, when you do that, you're going into that conversation with negative energy. So you're instantly lowering the whole atmosphere when you step into it. Whereas if you go into it with excitement, you're raising the energy in the room.
The vibrations.
And so you're already going into the environment of the conversation from a better standpoint. And this comes back to the innate fear of not being good enough as well, driving our limiting beliefs, right? So as you approaching an exam, you can go into the exam of, I worked really hard on this, I know I can do it and I deserve it, right? So you've got a healthy load of self-esteem, got a healthy load of belief, right? So you're more likely to do well. If you go into it with this view of, basically, I'm not good enough, there's no way I can pass this exam, it's going to be an absolute nightmare, I'll have to pay for it, then you're going to self-sabotage, right? Because you're basically going to find ways to, as we think our brains are great at validating and justifying it and finding ways to make it.
You're right. That's what the brain. You're right. Whether it's good or bad, you're right.
Yeah.
So what can I experience? I went from mindset, right? We're gonna switch my mindset from being grateful instead of being lack, abundant, versa. And I go try to tackle my fears and insecurities. What challenges I'm gonna run into, and most importantly, what are the quality of life? How is it gonna improve? How is it gonna benefit people's quality of life by doing this?
So, okay, biggest challenge you're going to have is environment, right? Ultimately, environment beats will over time. So, and there's a couple of elements of that. There's our external environment and there's our internal environment. So external environment, if we really want to make a change, but we are hanging around with negative people who are very critical about whether it's about you or just things in general, going to be very hard to move yourself forward, right? So we need to make a conscious effort of finding the right people to hang with that will support, who you want to become. And if that means going to seek out positive people, trying to find a new peer group to hang with, which is incredibly important, then that's what you need to do. Because ultimately, no matter how hard you try, the moment you hang back with people that are negative, it's going to bring you back down again. And yet the other bit is our internal environment. Right, and this is one of the reasons why this notion that habits take 21 days to form is utter rubbish. That was actually based on something like 1950. More recently,
it's not true. What do you update us? What's going on?
Well, more recently, I think in around 2017, 2018, there was some research that shows it takes something like 62 days. Right,
what?
And that's 62 days of consistent effort, consistent action before it'll eventually become a habit. And one of the reasons behind this is because, going back to the whole biochemical build-up, right, our single cell in our body, now most of us have about 7 trillion cells, right, obviously give or take depending on the size of us, but single one of those, in the same way that if you live in a warm climate, your body gets used to being warm, right? So if you then move into a cold climate, it takes a while for your body to adjust. Now, your cells are the same with your biochemical makeup. So if your biochemical makeup for the last 20, 30 years has been negative with lots of cortisol and all sorts of other negative biochemically enhanced, that's what your cells are effectively addicted to. It's what they're used to. So every time they want more of that. So every time you step into a positive mindset, your entire body will almost be trying to reject that and pull you back down.
Is that why people experience fatigue and body aches, even like the withdrawals, right? Like
yeah, and psychologically sabotage ourselves in many ways, and illness is very often one of them, right? It takes a lot of conscious effort, and I think certainly from my perspective, because when I learned all of this, I'm scientific. I did chemistry at university. I'm very left brain, so I needed to understand this, right? Because for me to have faith that something's going to work, I need to understand why it's going to work, why it's going to be difficult on the way. I think for a lot of people, understanding that, okay, you can try and be really positive for a week, and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, this is working, I give up. Well, and the long, because your body is trying to keep you in that stasis that it's, the word that it's used to, the longer you keep going, the more that balances out. But the good thing is, at the other end, you've then trained all of your cells to get used to this positive biochemical makeup. So when you have a bad day, your body helps lift you back up again. Right. So although this is something that makes it very challenging to overcome, once you've got there, it will then support you in the process.
What I'd say is, what's the greatest lesson that you've been honored to learn from life thus far?
Well, there's a few things, really. I think the number one thing that everyone needs to realize is that no one can fix you. No
one completes you.
No one completes you, no one fixes you. And if you feel you need to be fixed or you need completing, then you have to look within. Right? And it's not that you need fixing. None of us are broken. Our sun is shining. It's just that it's a cloudy day, right? The sun doesn't stop shining if you can't see the sun. It's just the clouds are in the way, right? So that's where most people are, and they can't see the sun for the clouds. So all they see is the clouds. Growth only occurs outside of your comfort zone, right? So limiting beliefs, etc., and human nature your brain strives to keep us safe and comfortable, whereas actually our souls really desire growth. right? So, and the only way to get that sense of fulfillment and fun in life is to actually stretch ourselves and step out of our comfort zone. And as you know, the other one was environment beats wealth. If you're hanging with the wrong people, they're gonna drag you down. Sometimes it's family, and there's not a lot we can do about it. I'm not advocating everybody dump their family, but there are ways to potentially limit how much exposure you get to them, and maybe limit the ways you interact with them.
If you don't advocate it, I will. I will. Don't worry, I got your back.
In extreme cases, maybe.